Should people have sex before marriage? I don't know. Let's find out.
Meet Jonny Thomas. Now, Jonny is 25 years old and still a virgin. Like many of us, Jonny has lustful thoughts and is very much interested in having sex, and plenty of it. However, as a Christian, he is torn between honoring God by being faithful to God's commands and following the lustful beast that dwells within. Meet Joe Miller. He's Jonny's favorite uncle. Now, Joe is a strong Christian who is greatly respected in the community. Many people consider Joe a wise and rational man. Jonny calls his uncle and requests a meeting. He asks his uncle, should people have sex before marriage? Is sex before marriage good or bad? Why should I wait to have sex? Joe senses the urgency in Jonny's voice and suggests that they meet at VT's diner to discuss his questions. Jonny agrees. Now, let's hear their story.
Uncle Joe, I got some problems. I'm 25 years old and I'm still a virgin. Most of my friends are having sex and they really seem to be enjoying it. And me, well, I've been having a bunch of lustful thoughts lately. And you know, Unc, I got a question. Is there anything wrong with people having sex before they get married? I mean, after all that wait until you get married stuff, that's old school. Nobody's doing that stuff anymore. You know, I'm really getting tired. Like, I'm just ready to get my freak on. You ought to be congratulated and praised for remaining a virgin this long. Most of us don't make it that far. You know, nephew, it is perfectly normal for a man to want to desire a woman. And you, sir, have exercised great self-control. I know I'm a Christian, but I'm missing out big time. So, what do you think you're missing out on? HIV? Or maybe you can be missing out on the gift that keeps on giving, that being herpes. There's also brother syphilis and Mr. Gonorrhea. There's a whole host of things that you can be missing out on. Well, most of my friends are practicing safe sex. They use condoms. Safe sex? There's no such thing. Condoms are only 98% effective against STIs. And that's if they're used properly. Well, 98% is pretty good. Tell that to the 2% that get the disease that could impact them for the rest of their lives. Well, my buddy Romeo is a real ladies' man. He has plenty of girlfriends. I wish I had his life. So, how many STDs has Romeo had? Jonny, it's just a matter of time before the player gets caught. It's a game of Russian roulette. I didn't know. There are a few other things to consider. Every time you have sex with somebody, in a sense, what you're doing is that you're giving that person a little bit of yourself, and they're giving you a little bit of them. In effect, what you're doing is that you are bonding spiritually. The more sexual partners we have, the more desensitized to God's gift, that being sex, we become. It becomes an act with little emotional attachment other than the physical attraction. So what's wrong with that? Oftentimes, when we fall in love and marry someone, we make the mistake of comparing our spouses with the scores of people that we've slept with. Well, that's not really fair to our spouses. And instead of us building a strong relationship based upon things that we're doing for the first time, we spend too much time in the past. And that can have a very negative impact on your marriage. Remember, nephew, every time you sleep with somebody, in effect, what you're doing is that you're sleeping with every person that person has ever slept with. Nephew, that could be a lot of people. So what's the answer to the question, Uncle Joe? Should people have sex before marriage? Well, let me ask you, do they have a license for all that sex that they're having? Okay, today's poor man's proverb is, should people have sex before marriage? Do you have a license for all that sex that you're having? Well, that depends on who you ask. Christian or not, people have varying opinions on this. Now, if you're looking in the Bible to find a smoking gun, if you will, I don't think you're going to find one. But however, God does weigh in on the subject, and here's what he has to say.
For this is the will of God, your sanctification, that you abstain from sexual immorality, that each one of you knows how to control his own body in holiness and honor, not in the passion of lust, like the Gentiles who do not know God. 1 Thessalonians chapter 4, verses 3 through 5. Flee from sexual immorality. Every other sin a person commits is outside the body, but the sexual immoral person sins against his body. 1 Corinthians chapter 6, verses 18 through 20.
Our bodies are the temple of God. So the question then becomes, what are we doing with God's temple? You know, when we have sex with other people, essentially what we are doing in a spiritual way is that we are bonding with them. Genesis 2:24 uses the term, and the two shall become one flesh. It is referring to a man and his wife. Now, as Christians, we should not be acting as if we do not know who God is.
Because of the temptation to sexual immorality, each man should have his own wife and each woman her husband. 1 Corinthians chapter 7, verse 2. But if they cannot control themselves, let them marry, for it is better to marry than to burn with passion. 1 Corinthians chapter 7, verse 9.
God knows how strong the desire is for us to have sex. In fact, He's the one that put it in us. Now, one of the 66 books is called The Song of Songs. And I have to tell you, I was really surprised when I read the book because I thought to myself, man, I can't believe this stuff is in here. Guess what? The book is all about sex, y'all. Can I be real for a minute? I understand the desire to have sex oh so well. You see, back in my 20s, I was celibate. However, there were a couple of times that I messed up. And when I did, I felt so bad. The spirit inside of me grieved, and it grieved greatly. I knew that I had let God down. And you know, those moments of pleasure in the sin did not erase the guilt and the shame that I felt. You see, the God that is in you does not like sin. And for me, it was a spiritual beatdown. Why? Because I knew better. And when you know better, you should do better.
Marriage is honorable among all, and the bed undefiled. But fornicators and adulterers God will judge. Hebrews chapter 13, verse 4.
Yippee-ki-yay! There you go. God has given us a license to have as much sex as we want. As a matter of fact, He has given a husband and wife the green light to enjoy each other sexually. So, if you want to swing from a chandelier, go ahead, do what you do. We are free to enjoy each other fully, so long as we do not violate the sanctity of marriage. So, to the question, should people have sex before they get married? I would say no. With respect to the question, do you have a license for all that sex you're having? Well, get yourself a marriage license and do what you do. Listen, when you start having sex, what you're doing is that you're opening up Pandora's box. Now, sex is a gift from God, and unfortunately, our society has chosen to misuse God's gift. And when we do so, there are consequences. One can argue that our sexually free society has become a gateway to pornography, prostitution, rape, and incest. As a result of premarital sex, many children are born into a one-parent household, and that is a big problem. Listen, Johnny, it's fine if you have sex as long as you have a marital license. We must always remember who we're representing. It doesn't matter what the world thinks, but rather what God thinks. So what are you missing out on? A case of HIV? Or perhaps you're missing out on the gift that keeps on giving, that being herpes. There's also brother syphilis and Mr. Gonorrhea. Jeez, come on, man. So, if you want to swing from the chandelier, do what you do. Do what you do.